Introducing the award-winning Pod 4 Ultra from 8 Sleep, a high-tech mattress cover you can easily add to your existing mattress. The pod changes the temperature of your mattress. You can set it anywhere from 55 to 110 degrees, letting you and your partner set different temperatures on each side. I keep mine at 60 so that I don't get hot. It can also adjust the position of your mattress to reduce snoring, and you get 30 days to try and decide if you love it. Go to 8sleep.com/Pakman and use the code Pakman to get $350 off your Pod 4 Ultra. The link is in the description. One of our sponsors is Lucy. Lucy's tobacco-free nicotine has helped many people. Their new product, Lucy Breakers, are tobacco-free nicotine pouches with a capsule that can be broken to release flavor. It is such a better option than smoke or vapor. Lucy also has regular nicotine pouches and nicotine gum. Try a tobacco-free nicotine alternative delivered to your door. Join the countless people that Lucy has helped. Go to lucy.co and use the code Pakman for 20% off your first order. The link is in the description. Only for adults of legal age. Every order is age verified. The product contains nicotine. Nicotine is an addictive chemical. Welcome to the show, everybody. Probably on Monday, we are going to be looking into an unavoidably obvious trend that is happening, which is that more Americans are leaving the country and at a faster rate than we have seen in a really long time. And the reason for this is not some vague, amorphous, or unknowable reason. It's because of Donald Trump, and it's because of record low support already for what Donald Trump is doing, and the reality that's hitting home for many Americans about what a fiasco this is and is going to continue being. Now, we've all heard, oh, I'm moving to Canada if X. Very few people do it, especially because it's hard to move to Canada. But that doesn't mean you can't go anywhere, and many Americans can, and we're going to talk about that. But underlying that is new polling, which finds that Americans really do not approve of the job that Trump is doing, and they really don't like the initiatives that he is focusing in on so far. So we're going to link to the poll, and you can look through it in detail. But some of the highlights. First and foremost, Trump approval currently 47%. This is below the February approval for any other presidency for which we have data other than Trump's own first presidency. You might recall that in February of the first year of Trump's first term, he had an approval of 44%. Trump's approval now in February of the first year of his second term is 47%. That's the worst out of anybody since we've had this data, other than Trump himself, who had an even slightly lower approval in 2017. If we look at demographic shifts, it's a disaster. Among 18 to 34-year-olds, Trump is down from 57 in January to 41. In 1 month, 16% of 18 to 34-year-olds have said, I used to support what Trump was doing, I no longer do. Hispanic adults, 50% approval in January, 41% now. Black adults, 30% approval in January, now down to 23. So just about every demographic group declining in approval of Trump, record low numbers. Now, what are the reasons? The reasons for the skepticism about what Trump has been up to so far, responsible for this decline in approval, are widespread. Number one, when it comes to high prices, and this is so important because one of the questions we've been asking is, are voters going to hold Trump accountable and blame Trump if and when things don't go as Trump predicted? 62% of Americans say Trump has not done enough to reduce prices. Forget about enough to reduce. Prices are sky high. Egg prices are higher than they've ever been. Gas prices are up. Grocery prices are up. Okay. 62% say he's not doing enough. Shockingly, even 47% of Republicans believe that Donald Trump is not doing enough when it comes to lowering prices, which he promised to do. Zoom out a little bit. What about more broadly when it comes to democracy? 52% of Americans say Trump is going too far in his use of presidential power. 52%, that's more than half. You don't get to 52% just with left-wingers and Democrats. The partisan breakdown, of course, is that Democrats are way more likely than Republicans to say that Trump is going too far, but more than half the country says Trump's going too far with presidential power. 48% say Trump has gone too far changing how the US government works. This includes DOGE. 51% say he's doing too much cutting of federal programs. 53% say it was a bad idea to try to shut down USAID and the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. 54% say giving Elon a prominent role was a bad idea. 58% say they think Trump's plan to take over Gaza and kick out all the Palestinians and prevent them from coming back, 58% say that's a bad idea. So on the issues, it's not going well. Then we get to this kind of squishier metric. Do you feel the country is going the right direction or the wrong direction? Do you feel optimistic or pessimistic about what's happening? 54% of Americans feel pessimistic about Donald Trump's second term. 75% of Americans say Trump's handling of the presidency is aligning with expectations. So that's critical. 25% of the country is surprised by what Trump is doing. You and I might say, how the hell could you be surprised? But many people don't really pay attention to campaigns or what's going on until it's actually people are in power and they're starting to do things. And then there was also some denial. But the fact that 25% of Americans are surprised by what Trump's done, it suggests maybe some of those people are reachable. 21% say it's a bad surprise. So that's the critical thing. You could be surprised pleasantly. You could go, I'm surprised this is going so well with Trump. Or you could be surprised negatively. Of the 25%, 4% are positively surprised, 21% are negatively surprised. That's a lot of people who are saying, this is not what I thought we were going to get. What else is important here? Only 23% of Americans believe that democracy is under attack. So the takeaway to me is there are almost certainly reachable Americans whose views as to what they expected to get from this presidency and what they're getting, they are open to saying, I've got to revise my understanding. I've got to revise my opinion. I need to do a rethink. At the same time, Americans have not come to believe in large numbers, majority numbers, 23% of the country, still a lot, but not a majority, that Trump represents an attack on democracy. So Democrats need to work with that. And what Democrats need to do is say, okay, we know there's opposition to what Trump is doing. We know there's disgust with the way this is going down. But let's focus, to a degree, as Elizabeth Warren said yesterday, on the pragmatic realities, economically and otherwise, and maybe not go to, he's destroying democracy. Now, is he trying to destroy democracy? It seems that he is. But we need to meet voters where they are. And if most Americans don't believe that that's what's going on, but they're concerned about DOGE, they're concerned about Elon, they're concerned about economics, then that's where Democrats need to meet voters. Will they do it as we start to think about the midterm election? I don't know. We'll keep talking to senators and members of Congress and asking them. There's a very interesting piece written in Finnish by Mikko Marttinen, a writer for Ilta Sanomat. I am convinced I'm mangling these Finnish pronunciations, but the article is fascinating, and we're going to link to it. Most browsers will automatically translate it to English for you. And what Mikko says is that there is way too much analysis being devoted to figuring out what's going on with Trump, what's going on with his speeches, and that his dejected, hunched over, impotent presentation at recent speeches, public events, and in media interviews has a really simple explanation. Trump's not smart, and he's getting old, and he's significantly declining. And what Marttinen argues in this piece is that political analysts often look to complex strategic or tactical reasons behind the weird stuff that Trump says, the strange way that he behaves. But what the author believes is that there's a really simple explanation, which is that Trump is the least intelligent president of the modern era. And with his advancing age, he is diminished cognitively with regard to his abilities. It started low and it's getting worse. And what Martin adds is that Trump's narcissism, combined with choosing advisors based only on loyalty, results in policies and statements that lack any depth, they lack any informed insight, and it leads to Trump frequently making foolish public statements. It's a worthwhile article to read because of some of the references. Martin talks about Linda Gottfredson's definition of intelligence, which means you have the ability to reason, you have the ability to plan, you can solve problems, you can think abstractly and comprehend complex ideas, and also learn from experience so you don't make the same mistakes. Trump doesn't do any of that stuff. And what the author asserts is that the public appearances of Trump and the behavior of Trump demonstrates he can't understand complex issues. He can't think abstractly. And this, Martin has come to conclude, is responsible for Trump's confusion between seeking asylum and a mental asylum. I love this because this is exactly what I've been suspecting for a year. Martin believes that Trump's confusion about asylum and that they are emptying out mental institutions into the United States and talking about Hannibal Lecter. Martin agrees with me. Trump's confused between I'm here to seek asylum and I'm in a mental asylum. And this is why Trump has been talking about Latin American psychiatric hospitals emptying out into the United States. He just doesn't understand this stuff. And Martin argues this goes to Trump's just lack of a basic comprehension with both written and audiovisual content. Now, the article also argues that the notion of Trump's wealth proving his intelligence being completely bogus, and it references the previous analyses that have been done, which suggests that if Trump had taken his inheritance and instead of doing real estate and Trump stakes and casinos that go bankrupt and all of it, if Trump had simply put all of his inheritance in an index fund, he would have done as well or better. And that does not really point to a genius businessman. Trump is likely the only president recently that doesn't regularly read books. Even George W. Bush was a big reader. And if you don't read, I believe it's difficult to understand complex issues. Miko Martinen agrees. It's difficult to understand complex issues if you don't read. We know that Trump's advisors have to create very short briefing memos. They have, Trump's name at the top and a couple visuals and charts just to try to keep Trump interested. So bottom line, is it overwrought to look deeply, more deeply than we have to get an answer? Should we favor the simplest answer for Trump's behavior? And what Miko Martinen believes in this article, which we will link to, is Trump was never very smart. He's lost cognitive capacity as he has aged. And he's also lost the ability to speak as coherently as he used to. You look at old Letterman appearances, and Trump said some wacky stuff, but he was dramatically more coherent. And so Miko Martinen says, the explanation's simple. Let's not keep looking for things we don't need to look for. Trump's not very smart and he's declining, and that's all you need to know. What do you think? Is Miko Martinen right? Mike Pence, Donald Trump's former vice president, has called out his former boss over the war in Ukraine. Specifically, Mike Pence responded to Donald Trump's claim that Ukraine started the war by clarifying that Russia chose to launch an unprovoked and brutal invasion. Now, on the surface, this might sound like a basic acknowledgement of the facts, and of course it is, but that's actually newsworthy in and of itself. So let's first look at what Mike Pence tweeted, quote, "Mr. President, Ukraine did not start this war. Russia launched an unprovoked and brutal invasion, claiming hundreds of thousands of lives. The road to peace must be built on the truth." So let's take this step by step. Is Pence right on the facts? He is, undoubtedly. Putin started this war. He chose to start it. That's who's responsible. If we zoom out a little bit, It's almost unheard of for a vice president to so openly and directly repudiate the president that they served under. Historically, you see vice presidents follow the administration's line even after they leave office. The bigger point here is the transformation of the Republican Party itself. A lot of people who used to despise the old Republican Party find themselves feeling a little bit nostalgic, right? They say, I didn't like them back then, but I wish I could have them back because at least they aren't as bad as this MAGA movement, which is more extreme and it's more detached from facts. And in some cases, it's just openly antagonistic to basic democratic values. There were Republicans who used to pride themselves on patriotism and supporting the troops and standing up to dictatorships. And it goes back to the Cold War. Did it go too far in many cases? Absolutely. Did I agree with their perspectives on what patriotism was at the time? Yes, I did. But what we see right now is significantly more depraved because you see prominent figures in the MAGA movement praising authoritarian strongmen, some dictators, downplaying Russian aggression, labeling anyone who says to them, these aren't really democratic regimes that you're supporting. They say you're disloyal, you're unpatriotic. And their definition of patriotism has shifted into something that embraces violence and sometimes treasonous rhetoric. They used to fearmonger about communist dictators in the Soviet Union. They probably went too far with it. That was part of the Republican brand for decades. Now you have parts of the MAGA wing almost in this, they worship Vladimir Putin in some way. They praise him as a strong leader. And that brings us back to Mike Pence. It shouldn't really be heroic what Mike Pence is doing. It shouldn't really come off as brave. He's stating the obvious. Ukraine didn't start the war, Russia invaded. That's what happened. And by MAGA standards today, it's almost considered a radical statement. How low have we fallen that Mike Pence, who remember, is extremely conservative by older definitions. He's extremely religious. He has policies that I vehemently oppose. He has started to look slightly more sane in contrast to the belligerence of Trump. That captures the state of the Republican Party. You take a step away from blind loyalty to Trump, you are in the crosshairs for the GOP where they were demanding he be hanged. I don't want to romanticize Mike Pence's politics. His record is extraordinarily disturbing. His points of view and policy positions are disgusting on so many issues. The point is, he's choosing not to follow the MAGA gaslighting playbook on this specific issue. And what I'm wondering is, are there more Republicans ready to follow Mike Pence's lead in calling out the misinformation? Putin started the war. That's it. I don't want to hear any more about Ukraine being responsible here. Or has the Republican Party permanently realigned under MAGA, making voices like Pence's the exception rather than the rule for the duration of Trump's second term? I lean towards the latter. I don't know that, especially people in power still, I don't know that they're going to come forward and be willing to say the sort of stuff that Mike Pence is saying, as basic and milquetoast as it really should be considered. We are rapidly approaching 3 million YouTube subscribers. As I told you about on the show yesterday, I spoke to a couple of lawyers who believe that there is an appetite in the Trump administration to antagonize left-wing independent media. The way we can be most protected from that for the duration of this presidency is to have the largest platform possible. We are a little over 100,000 subscribers away from 3 million on YouTube. I invite you with peace, love, and humility to help us get to that 3 million number quickly. I appreciate the tens of thousands who have done it over the last week. You can go to davidpakman.com. Actually, I think davidpakman.com/YouTube works. If not, just search David Pakman YouTube. Hit the subscribe button. It is completely free, and I will update you as to our progress on Monday. Let's take a quick break. This is a good enough show that I think we should record it and publish it. That's kind of the way I'm feeling about today's show. Let's talk about a game changer in sleep technology, our sponsor 8 Sleep and their revolutionary Pod 4 Ultra. The Pod is a high-tech mattress cover, and you can easily add it to your existing mattress. You can cool or heat your mattress based on your preferences and even elevate your head if you snore. I run hot. I hate getting hot when I sleep. That's why I set my 8 Sleep Pod to keep my mattress at a cool 60 degrees at night. You can set it anywhere from 55 to 110 degrees. You can set each side of the bed independently to a different temperature depending on your preferences versus your partner's, or you can set your pod to detect your body's sleep cycles and automatically adjust temperature for optimal sleep. The pod can also detect when you're snoring and automatically adjust the position of the bed to reduce or even stop the snoring. This can be a huge factor in how rested you will feel the next day, and your sleeping partner will thank you bigly. You get 30 days to try it at home. Return it if you don't like it, but I know you'll love it as much as I do. Go to 8sleep.com/Pakman. Use the code Pakman to get $350 off your Pod 4 Ultra. The link is in the description. Today's show is sponsored in part by Lucy Breakers. This is a tobacco-free nicotine pouch with a capsule that can be broken to release extra flavor. Such a better option than smoke or vapor. Lucy Breakers come in 4 or 8 milligram strength. You can choose mint, apple ice, mango, berry citrus. Also, check out Lucy's regular nicotine pouches and nicotine gum, which come in their own varieties of flavors. And you can subscribe for convenient home delivery. If you're not completely satisfied, Lucy offers a 30-day money-back guarantee. Try a tobacco-free nicotine alternative. Join the countless people who Lucy has helped. Go to lucy.co, use code Pakman for 20% off your first order. Link in the description. Lucy products are only for adults of legal age. Every order is age verified. Warning, this product contains nicotine. Nicotine is an addictive chemical. The David Pakman Show, of course, continues to be supported directly by you. I want to thank the, let me be precise, 138 recent new members. I really appreciate you. Consider a membership at joinpakman.com. Cheap, quick, packed with benefits, including the daily bonus show and commercial-free audio and video streams, and access to a members-only soundboard. Read about all of it. Sign up in under a minute at joinpakman.com. I will also mention we are in the final weeks of pre-order for my forthcoming book, The Echo Machine. I have many podcast and TV appearances to announce that will be happening in March. You can pre-order the book at davidpakman.com/book. And if you would like a signed copy, order those exclusively at davidpakman.com/booksmith. Donald Trump has done something terrifying with regard to expanding presidential power. There was a time where Republicans would have forcefully opposed this. That time is not now. The executive order that Donald Trump has signed effectively dismantles the independence of federal regulatory agencies, and it consolidates unprecedented power under the White House. This is not normal. This is certainly not democracy. It is, as Senator Bernie Sanders described it earlier this week, authoritarianism. It's more than a temporary power grab. This is the biggest executive power grab in American history, and it fundamentally reshapes the balance of power in our government, and so many people are not understanding what is going on. Now, you may recall that earlier this week, I played this clip for you.
Lastly, we have another executive order that President Trump signed relating to independent agencies. This executive order would establish important oversight functions in the Office of Management and Budget and its subsidiary office, OIRA, supervising independent agencies and many of their actions, and also reestablishes the longstanding norm that only the president or the attorney general can speak for the United States when stating an opinion as to what the law is.
The order, titled Ensuring Accountability for All Agencies, claims to promote presidential supervision and control of the entire executive branch. This is not about accountability. This is about control. It is about absolute unchecked control. And it is a direct attack on the very foundations of our democratic system. Now, here's what this order does. The president now controls all regulatory agencies. We're talking about supposedly independent agencies like the FEC, the FCC, the FTC, the SEC. They are no longer independent. They are now subject to direct White House oversight. What on earth does Trump know about any of it? Now, the SEC, of course, regulates Wall Street. That's now under Trump's thumb. And that opens up the door to insider trading, favoritism, the targeting of political opponents by the SEC for particular stock trades. The FTC enforces antitrust laws. They can now selectively target companies that oppose the administration and allow friendly monopolies to flourish. Not that the FTC has a good track record of monopoly busting anyway, but especially now. Elections, the FEC, which oversees campaign finance and election integrity, that is now under White House control, meaning the president can directly influence how elections are regulated and enforced. And it goes way further. Agencies like the FDA, the EPA, responsible for drug approvals, food safety, protecting the environment, they are overtly politicized. Now, you might be saying, David, weren't they kind of implicitly politicized anyway? Yes, they were. But now that is completely unrestrained by the overt politicization. Climate change regulations, gone overnight. Scientific research, subject to what Trump wants researched. And they can even say, okay, you did it. You did the research. I don't want it released to the public. Not going public. The implication here is that there is no longer any neutral enforcement of economic, environmental, or election laws. It's just dictated by Trump and political loyalty. That's number one. Secondly, budgets. The White House can block agency budgets or say we are going to send the funds elsewhere. The OMB, Office of Management and Budget, is led by Trump loyalist Russell Vought. We spoke about him on Monday. They now have the power to just adjust funding allocations for independent agencies. They can defund opposition if they don't like it. If an agency says, we believe the law is counter to presidential policy, they can just be strangled by the White House. Agencies that fall in line will be fully funded, even if it is against the law. And here's the consequence, that Congress no longer controls federal spending on regulatory enforcement. That is a power that Congress had. The executive branch can just choke it out, choke out the funding, choke out opposition agencies, and reward their allies. Number three, as Will Scharf mentioned in the video, the final legal interpretation comes from one of two people, Trump or Attorney General Pam Bondi. You're a federal employee. You've got to follow Trump's opinion about the law. Imagine that. Agency lawyers, doesn't matter. Inspectors general, independent counsel. It's Trump's opinion of the law that matters. And this effectively allows laws to be rewritten overnight. Trump can unilaterally change how federal laws are interpreted and enforced, and thus legal consistency disappears. Agencies can't push back against corrupt, illegal, and unconstitutional directives because the president's interpretations are all that matter. Number four, installing White House liaisons at regulatory agencies, sort of like babysitters. The White House will have a liaison in every independent agency to enforce Trump's will be done within those agencies. And these liaisons are going to monitor daily operations. They're going to be in the bathrooms. Do we like the kind of toilet paper you've got in here? Whatever the hell they want. The agency directors themselves will no longer have the ability to act without White House approval. This is now a way to directly enforce what Trump wants inside of agencies. Now, if some of this sort of sounds familiar, if you're thinking a little bit about Steve Bannon, or was it Stephen Miller, all of this is rooted in the unitary executive theory. This was a once fringe legal idea that the president has sole control over the entire executive branch. And it's a theory that has been championed by Russell Vought and others. But here's the real irony with this. Some of you are old enough to remember, and you don't have to be that old. Some of you are, a 10-year-old would be old enough to remember when conservatism and the Republican Party claimed to be the champions of limited government, checks and balances, and restricting how much power the president has. They railed against executive overreach, often when it was a Democratic president in office, but at one point, they genuinely seemed sort of committed to it. Under Trump, they've abandoned that principle completely. This is another reminder that they have their stated principles, limited government, blah, 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 and it's meaningless as soon as they deem it inconvenient. If what's convenient is letting Trump control every aspect of every agency, forget about limited government. We don't care. So this is an executive order that doesn't just expand presidential power, it erases some of the final restraints on it. The federal government no longer operates with checks and balances. Regulations and law are now dictated by the president. And if you leave it unchecked, and this is what's terrifying, functionally, we are no longer a democracy. This order will face legal challenges. The fact that it was even signed is a chilling escalation in Trump's efforts to consolidate power. And if it is appealed all the way up to the Supreme Court, look at who's on the Supreme Court. Another aspect to this disaster. And finally, don't forget when Trump recently said, if I'm saving my country, it's not against the law. Reminiscent of when Nixon said, if the president does it, it's not against the law. Trump believes that he is above the law. He has signed an executive order that reaffirms that, and the only check on it may end up being a Supreme Court that has 3 justices on it that were nominated by Trump and is one of the most extreme right-wing courts, certainly in my lifetime, much longer than that as well. Terrifying, absolutely terrifying stuff. Remember that we are now inching so close to 3 million YouTube subscribers. In terms of left-wing shows, you've got the Young Turks, you've got Midas Touch, and you've got Brian Tyler Cohen above 3 million. We would be the 4th to enter that category. It feels like just months ago, we were talking about 2 million subscribers, and we are heading to 3. Help us get there a little more quickly. We've got some great stuff planned for when we reach that number. It's free. Just hit the subscribe button on YouTube. What happens when the red states run out of money? You know, Republican-led states love to talk about low taxes and small government and fiscal responsibility. And it all sounds great, right? I mean, keep more of your money, attract businesses, live free, and all of this stuff. There is one little problem with it, which is that cutting taxes means cutting revenue. And when the money runs out, who is going to pay the price? Turns out it's not just red states. It's all of us, especially us in the blue states. Because when red states slash taxes and struggle to fund basics like schools and roads, they are quietly being propped up by us in the blue states. States like Texas and Florida and Tennessee, you know, they brag about there's no state income tax and it's so cheap to live here. And it sounds awesome until you realize that they still need to pay for stuff. How do they do it? Well, they shift the burden. Instead of income tax, they rely on sales taxes and property taxes and car registration fees. And on a percentage level, these hit low and middle income families the hardest. For example, Texas has some of the highest property taxes in the country. Instead of a progressive state income tax, which disproportionately hits the wealthy, you've got property taxes that as a share of the household budget are way more expensive for low-income Texans than they are for high-income Texans. You look at Florida. Florida leans on a sales tax, which takes a bigger chunk of income from poor people than from the wealthy as a share of their total household budget. So, you know, the no income tax slogan sounds okay sometimes, but it's really a shell game because the money's got to come from somewhere. And usually it comes from those who can least afford it. This brings us to the state of Kansas. In 2012, we covered it at the time. Governor Sam Brownback, a Republican, went all in on tax cuts, slashed income taxes, and said the same thing as Trump. This will boost the economy so much that we're going to do awesome. And instead, the state got a fiscal disaster. Revenue crashed. Schools were gutted, roads fell apart, and by 2017, even Republicans had enough and they said, we're going to roll back these tax cuts. Kansas is the prototypical cautionary tale in this entire thing. You cut taxes too much, you can't pay for basics. And Kansas is not alone. States like Oklahoma and Louisiana have faced similar crises. The budget shortfalls lead to cuts in education and healthcare and infrastructure. Those cuts make the state less competitive. People are less able to get themselves good jobs. The economy is weaker. Quality of life goes down for everybody. It's really a vicious circle. And the sick irony is that many of these red states rely on federal money to stay afloat. That means that taxpayers in blue states like California and New York are subsidizing the red states. And if you look at the Rockefeller Institute of Government, states like Mississippi, Kentucky, Alabama, they get way more in federal funds than they pay in federal taxes. They are taking more than they give. And it's so ironic, given that red states criticize blue states and they go, big government, taxes too high, but they are the ones depending on that big government to fund their budgets. It's like cutting off a branch that you're sitting on and then asking someone to hold you up and go, we don't need these branches taking up space. Well, someone's holding you up. And the consequences of the low tax policies don't disappear. When the schools are no good and the education worsens, it's worse for the state over the long term. Businesses and families don't just move to a state for low taxes. They want good schools, they want safe roads, they want reliable services. That's why when Sarah Huckabee Sanders says Arkansas is the best place to move to because it's so cheap, it's cheap partially because there's no demand. I'm so sorry to say it to people who live in Arkansas. If red states can't provide basics, the low taxes and low cost of living don't really look that good. So it's another example of how low taxes sound great in theory. I'd love to keep more of my money. Why not? But then you see that red states can't pay the cost. They turn to the federal government, and by extension, they're turning to me. They are turning to taxpayers in blue states to bail them out. It's not really fiscal responsibility. It's just passing the buck to somebody else. There are people who argue that SSRI antidepressants lead to mass shootings. One of those people seems to be Piers Morgan. Piers Morgan had this wacky panel that included Dr. Birx. Remember Dr. Birx from the COVID days? And Piers is jumping on there's a link here between the antidepressants and violent outbursts, mass shootings. This all seems to be couched in support of Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s conspiracy theories. Let's take a listen to it, then we will discuss.
America is ridiculously over-medicated, particularly in the area of antidepressant drugs and anxiety drugs and so on. And Britain's going the same way.
No, I think it's great. I think it's great.
There are millions of young people.
You know what happens?
Hang on, Francesca. Hang on. Don't start shouting.
A private little
Don't start shouting.
Let me finish. You asked
let me put a question to you.
I bet money that Francesca's on drugs right now.
Francesca, let me put a question to you.
Not nearly.
Hang on, guys. Hang on.
You're grifting.
Can you both please hang on?
What happens is,
Francesca,
when you rip people's medications away.
Can't stop.
Let me make a point, please. Let me make my
Piers,
point.
Can I just
Let
say
him
for a minute,
respond.
I feel like I'm.
Everyone stop talking for a moment.
I'm on a panel.
Francesca, the point I'm making is America has 80% of the world painkiller consumption. 80%, right? You have millions of young...
Now we're talking about painkillers.
Respond yet. Millions of young people who are taking completely unnecessary, mind-bending drugs for things like anxiety, depression, often self-diagnosed. And guess what happens? You then have a load of weirdo, loner kids running around with their brains scrambled who commit mass shootings and stuff like that. There is a direct correlation. And we're going the same way in Britain. Young people are getting massively over-medicated. So I am actually in favor of RFK trying to pull America away from its addiction to mind-bending drugs.
So, of course, the phrase mind-bending is being selectively and pejoratively used. I prefer to just stick to what we know. The criticism from some has been SSRIs can cause or they can contribute to violent behavior. Some people on SSRIs, they get aggressive. They might self-harm, they might harm others. Now, what is that claim based on? 3 different things. Number 1, we have anecdotal reports. There are cases where an individual on an SSRI committed a violent act. That doesn't tell us anything about whether the SSRI caused it, but we have anecdotal reports. One of the things you have to consider is that if you have a large enough population, it's sort of like saying every mass shooter drank water. And at some point you got to go, well, what's the base rate? How many people are drinking water? Now, SSRIs are not like water, much to the dismay of Piers, who says everybody's on them, but SSRIs are widely enough prescribed that you're going to find people on SSRIs who have done all sorts of things. It's sort of like saying, hey, how many, I don't even know, how many people who are driving recklessly are on a cholesterol medication? And we would say, well, there's so many people on cholesterol medication. Is it really the medication? So we've got anecdotal reports. Number 2, we've got legal cases. There are lawsuits that allege the SSRI caused the violent behavior. As you all know, you can file a lawsuit saying anything. The fact that there are cases where that is asserted doesn't mean that it is true. Now, what do the studies say? This is what I care about. There are studies that have found, some studies that have found a correlation between SSRI use and increased aggression. Now, there's a few critical things to understand there. First of all, a correlation does not mean a causation, and I'll give you one a possible interpretation of this. People who are prescribed SSRIs, the population of people on SSRIs, are more likely to have an underlying mental health condition because that's what's being treated. The population on SSRIs is more likely to have some combination of depression, anxiety, or a personality disorder. That may independently explain the risk of violent behavior. In other words, the population on SSRIs might be more prone to violence regardless of whether they are on the SSRIs. It's sort of like the people that go to Harvard are really successful, but the people that get into Harvard are also really successful even if they don't go. How much of it is about Harvard? How much of it is about the people that get in? I think it's a pretty good analogy, although I'm not equating Harvard and SSRIs. When you look at RCTs, randomly controlled trials, they do not find evidence that SSRIs cause violence. Now, it is true that there are trials that have reported people on SSRIs, on average, are more agitated or might have suicidal ideation. That's a small subset of folks who get those as side effects from the SSRIs. Those are pretty rare. And also, just because you are agitated or are thinking about suicide doesn't mean you're going to go out and commit mass shootings or violent acts. Now, then the third thing I think is important to consider is there a biological plausibility? Serotonin is involved in regulating mood and impulse control and aggression. So you could make the biological argument, SSRIs, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, they mess with serotonin, they could affect behavior. Sure, plausible. The truth is that both low and high serotonin levels can be associated with aggression. And the relationship is extraordinarily complex. And we would not really be in a position to honestly make an assessment about that. So it's very important to understand the potential side effects of any medication you're taking. People should be monitored when they are on these medications, just like they should be for most things that you're on long term. People on cholesterol medication like me, I think it's every 6 months or 12, I get a liver function test. Great. We want to understand what are the potential side effects. We want to look at that. The benefit of SSRIs in treating depression and anxiety seems to outweigh the risks hugely, assuming that they are being properly prescribed and monitored. And we still, this is a classic. SSRIs responsible for everything, the mass shootings, Alex Jones level stuff. We just don't have the evidence. And my opinion is we should be led by the evidence. Don't forget that the best way to support the David Pakman Show is by becoming a member, which gives you access to the daily bonus show, the regular show with no commercials. You also get access to our entire archive of every episode dating back a really long time, and plenty of other awesome membership perks. Go to joinpakman.com, joinpakman.com. It is great to welcome to the program today Senator Amy Klobuchar, who is in the middle of somewhere between 6 and 8 different sort of breaking stories that we're following, including budget and eggs and so many different things. Senator, I really appreciate your time. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, David. Well, it's great to be on. I'm excited.
So to start with, I saw that a few days ago, you said on CNN, you think we're not quite there when it comes to a constitutional crisis, but you certainly sounded cautious and at least somewhat concerned that it could certainly go in that direction. We've seen this executive order from the president, which increases the power of the office of the presidency, despite it used to be the case that Republicans said they actually want to limit the power of the president, and everything seems to be backwards with regard to that all of a sudden. Are you closer to this concern about a present and actual constitutional crisis? And if not, what specifically are you sort of looking for before you would say that?
Well, my concerns grow every day. You have, of course, the president this week tweeting out a picture of himself with the crown on. I think it's not real subtle what he's talking about there. You have both the vice president and the president basically saying they don't have to follow the law. And then you also have this horrific situation at the Justice Department where career prosecutors, and these are not exactly members of the resistance. Okay, they were not at the Women's March, I'll put it that way. They are Federalist Society members. They are, one of them clerked for Justice Roberts and for Justice Kavanaugh when he was a circuit court judge. And the other one, of course, clerked for Justice Scalia. And they basically resigned. And one of them said, you've got to be, if they can find a fool or a coward to file this motion to remove the charges against Eric Adams, that person is not me, he said. That person is not me. And I could not believe how out there these conservative, very conservative lawyers, prosecutors have been in terms of saying this is just wrong. This is wrong under the law, wrong under the Constitution. So, that is what makes you realize this is a mounting crisis. But I just don't think to say it's a constitutional crisis, well, that's the moment where, Donald Trump says, no, I'm defying the court order. And that hasn't happened yet. It didn't happen in his first administration. And as we know, he can be a lot of bluster. I also find some solace in the fact that these judges, one on birthright citizenship and that people who are born in America are America. That's what the Constitution says. That case, when the judges have looked at that, that's heading to the Supreme Court. They have upheld judges looking at this, including Trump-appointed judges, have upheld the law. And then there's a number of other cases about freezing the funds or allowing Elon Musk to rifle through data where judges have intervened. And I know that's not solace when you look at that Supreme Court. I was ardently opposed to many of those justices, but it is the law. And they have consistently, through the lower courts, been applying that law. So to me, we get to the real constitutional crisis when he refuses to follow the law after a judge has said what he's doing is illegal.
Another acute area of concern is what the newly minted FBI director, Kash Patel, plans to do. I watched with great interest the minutes that you got to ask questions. I would love for you to give us a little bit of a peek behind the scenes in terms of when you're preparing with your team and you're going to bring up all of these different things that he has previously said, which they're in black and white in the sense that there's either video, there's audio recordings, there's tweets. Do you anticipate that he will play this game of, I don't have the quote in front of me, the date is a while ago, and using that essentially as an escape hatch from having to deal with the substance? Do you and your team anticipate that that's what he will do? And given that, is it still worth it because he refuses to engage with the substance? What's the strategy?
The strategy is to show America who this person is, knowing that our Republican colleagues have been wimping out on this. They have not been fulfilling their constitutional duty, it says, to advise and consent. They've been acquiescing and accepting, in my words. every step of the way, with some exceptions. So the first thing you do in your mind is you say, okay, there are some exceptions. With Kash Patel this week, when the vote finally happened,
Yeah.
The Republicans went lockstep, but not Lisa Murkowski, who tends to be a maverick, and not Susan Collins. If only two more had joined them, we would have defeated Kash Patel. And so my first approach here is I've got to get out things that could potentially get Republican votes. And those are things like, in my case, I asked about, these officers who protected the Capitol. And when they testified, you actually said they were lying, that they should be prosecuted for lying when they told the truth about what had happened when the mob of insurrectionists invaded.
Yes.
I went after the fact that he had said they should close the FBI headquarters down and turn it into a museum. There's a lot of Republicans that think it's good to investigate cybercrime and terrorist activities. All that goes on in the headquarters. I emphasized how he had repeatedly said that the FBI was corrupt, because I think there were a lot of Republicans that know that's not true. And so I went through a number of things he'd done that might not be the things that maybe your listeners or even I would find most appalling about Kash Patel, but I was trying to find some of those sweet spots, and I guess it worked with two people. But
I want to ask about the two
get him on the
people.
record. Get him on the record, okay?
Go ahead, yeah.
So important, because even if you're going to lose, and you probably are with these Republicans right now, how they're acting,
Yes.
that. So you ask questions to get people on the record to say, no, I'm going to enforce this law. That's actually record evidence in lawsuits. If they don't do a certain thing and it's illegal, then the people that will bring a case are going to be able to point to when they said on the record that they would enforce a law. Or you get them to actually do something because of what they said under oath. So there is a role here that isn't immediately satisfying. Because
Right.
you end up, the Republicans acquiesce, and I'm sure some of your listeners are like, well, great. Like, what did you do? Well, you've gotten them on the record, and I've found, especially like in antitrust cases, I'm a geek on that, do a lot of that. When you get this stuff on the record, it's evidenced using cases, and then they feel like, maybe I'm going to have to do what I said I'd do when I was under oath.
Do you think there's a degree to which the couple of senators that say, I'm thinking independently, I'm a no on this one, it's sort of a contrived veneer of independence in this sense? A couple didn't vote for Kash Patel, and a couple didn't vote here and there. But the totality is Kash Patel got in, Hegseth got in, Tulsi got in, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is in. Is it a game made to create the appearance of independence, but they don't really get in the way of any nominee?
Now I see why you're so popular, because that is a very smart thing. I think about it all the time, and sometimes I actually not sure, you don't know, are they playing a game, are they not?
Yeah.
But it certainly does seem weird that different people, now I will say running through it is usually Susan and Lisa, who tend to be more independent. But, Mitch joins on one, and someone, and it's just, and then we never get to the magic number of 4. And I said to them with Kash Patel in the Judiciary Committee, I'm like, could you just stand up for one of them? Just one of them? Because we have made independent decisions before. People have had to withdraw their names on the Democratic side, and sometimes they don't go for a vote, right? Sometimes they end up having to withdraw their names from consideration because there's objection. And the only one that really happened to in a big way was none other than Matt Gaetz,
Right.
in the last year. But it really does bother me that they're not standing up. And now they're going to have other opportunities to stand up, right, on some of these budget issues and some of this crazy stuff of giving these tax cuts to billionaires when people can't even afford their childcare or can't buy their first house. Those are the things that some of the people that voted for Donald Trump, I know because I had some voters that voted for me and him in the last election, right? Like 10% of them in my state. And they really want you to do something about costs, prescription drugs, all these things. And all signs are from accidentally firing the avian flu frontline workers. That was my favorite of the week, by the way. Oops, now we're going to have to rehire them. Or the 300 people that were watching the nuclear stockpile. Oh, that was a mistake. To the fact that they really haven't, everything they've done from the proposed tariffs to the workforce issues, some of these things, these are going to bring prices up, not down. So the way I look at it simply, corruption's up, chaos is up, and yes, egg prices and basically the cost of living is up. That's what's happened since he's gotten in.
Senator, you've talked a little bit about the limo ride, as we now maybe know it, on Inauguration Day. And you've said,
it was the beast. It was the president's car.
And I respect
Joe Biden's car. I hitched a ride with Joe Biden to the inauguration, and Donald Trump just happened to be in there too.
Well, it's interesting you frame it that way. And I know that you've said you're not going to betray confidences, and I understand that. But with all of the concern about the way Trump sort of sat hunched over and dejected in the Oval Office as Elon Musk held court, the way that the same thing played out on Fox News, where Hannity is deferring to Musk rather than Trump, and it's all taking on this very strange kind of perspective. Did the now president in that limo ride, to the extent that you're comfortable sharing, did he seem even interested in becoming president again? Because I don't know if it's exhaustion, age, decline, or just he'd rather be golfing in Florida. What was your sense of that?
Well, I wish the way that he interacted with President Biden and Vice President Harris when we were in the White House. That we were also there for an hour with about 12, 15 of us, right?
Yeah.
The speaker. And he was cordial with them. He was cordial with me. I think they would say the same thing. And we talked about everything from the football game that had been on the night before. I brought that up because it was Philadelphia, so I thought President Biden would, he likes the team. And it was in the snowstorm with LA. I brought up the LA fires because I thought that was a really important thing to do. I knew that President Trump was into the Olympics, and I thought it's important to talk about the fact that LA has to rise from the ashes here. We talked about a number of other things that they each brought up, and he was engaged. And then the minute he got behind that microphone, the minute we got there, it was like a different thing. He was doing the, going after them, doing the same political thing that you see at the rallies, maybe a little different tone. And it was just, I think that that's who he is. He does what he thinks is going to work with the people that support him, instead of being that leader that reaches out beyond those people to try to do something for the good of this nation.
Is there a real Trump in that case? Because, I had the privilege in December of meeting with former President Biden in a small group at the White House. And it was exactly the same guy that I had come to know over decades through the media. There was no daylight. It was the real guy. Mm-hmm. Which is the real Trump in this sense?
I think the real Trump is sort of, don't judge someone by what they say behind, when you're there, judge them by what their actions are, right? Judge them by their actions. And it's just so unbelievably more coarse than it was even in the first Trump presidency, in terms of just making these decisions to let Elon Musk, a billionaire, the richest man in the country, just make these decisions about who's going to get fired. That's one of the things that bothers me. Like, if a business comes in and wants to make cuts, this happens all the time, right? It's capitalism. They come in, new CEO, or sold to something, they're going to make some cuts, or they're going to make some changes. And this is true in government as well. So you look at what your purposes are. Do you need a certain division? Do you need a certain job function? What's the merit of a person in the job? And then you make decisions. It's not easy, but you make decisions. And that you can do that on a large scale. Major companies have done this. And yes, they offer buyouts and all those things. But what these guys did is they came in without regard to the job function or the merits of a person, and just said, you know what, we're getting rid of all the probationary people, which are the younger people for the most part who've come in, or people who've just been promoted. And then they do that. And so, okay, even if you have no empathy for the federal employees, and I'm not saying you, David, but let's just say someone,
if one has no empathy,
they want to see a change, and they want to see, I agree, we can make things more efficient. But what's missing here is you taking some incredibly important job functions or some incredibly high performing employees. And you're just like, no, we don't want you. And so many people go into public service for reasons other than money. Duh. They go in there because they really care about something and they want to use their skills. And so what bothers me just from moving this big ship is you want to have that kind of person in the government that's making these hard decisions or deciding what we're going to do about foreign aid in a country or deciding what we're going to do when someone's benefits gets messed up. And it just bothers me, the coarseness and meanness of that. And Elon Musk just seems to just love it. He's tweeting every day about this. And then what's going to be the effect on people when you get rid of air traffic controllers and you say you don't value their service? Well, I think we know what the effect is going to be on people. Some of this stuff is dangerous. This avian flu issue, I do a lot with ag. This is real. It's spreading into cattle and everything else. And so then they accidentally fire the people working on it. So I think you've got that issue. And then you have to ask yourself why. And I think this is so key because we can talk about this all we want about. Elon Musk did this. Elon Musk did this. Donald Trump's letting Elon Musk do it. Well, why are they doing it? Well, right before us is the answer. Their tax plan, which is literally over $2 trillion in tax cuts for the wealthiest people in this country, including Elon Musk. So that's what they're looking at. And how do they get the money? They know that with some of their conservatives, they're not just going to add on that much more debt. They're going to add a lot of debt, but they're like, well, we got to make cuts somewhere. So they're making the cuts on the backs of regular people. They should be helping people, making it easier, as I said, to buy a new house or get mortgages or childcare or pay your rent. There's all these kinds of cool things we could be doing right now and that with algorithms that Elon Musk is well aware of, where people are getting ripped off on their rents. And instead they're going this direction of let's just take a sledgehammer and let's piss off all our allies and let's go meet with Russia in some kind of weird, Putin shock and awe, and we'll go meet with him and diss Zelensky, who's put his whole country on the line, and they're losing people's lives every day to fight for freedom so that the Russians don't march right into a NATO country and then we're sending our own troops over. All of these things are just to me, it's not what our country's about. And for the people that did vote for him, and I know, like I said, I share some of the voters with him. They vote for him because they want to change. They want to bring costs down. It was a change election. I get all that. And we were ready to say, okay, if you guys want to find some common ground on these really gnarly problems of people getting their health care denied and claims denied, we really do want to work with you. But that's not where they're headed at all. No. They're just trying to dismantle and get a bunch of tax cuts for the wealthiest. And so that's what's been the most, I think, for people that voted for him. They're starting to say, even within only a month, they're like, wait a minute. I think one poll showed 66% of Americans, CBS poll, that he wasn't doing enough on costs and that he wasn't doing enough to bring inflation down. And I don't, the fact that they voted for him on that basis, that makes some sense for them. I didn't agree with it, but I get why they did it. But now they're going to see what he's really up to.
Senator Amy Klobuchar, really appreciate your time. Great. And we will follow all of it and be in touch with you. Thank you so much.
I hope I can go on again. I'll always wear a scarf to match the sweater. That's kind of my plan. And it is the Gophers maroon for the University of Minnesota Gophers. I'm sure you were thinking that.
It's the UMass colors as well. So that's why I wore it. Yeah. Thank you so much. Really great to talk to you.
Okay. It was really fun. Thanks.
If you value what we do at the David Pakman Show, remember to support us on Patreon. Go to patreon.com/David Pakman Show, where you can get access to behind the scenes videos, the daily bonus show, the commercial-free daily show. You can support the show for as little as $2 a month. Check it out at patreon.com/David Pakman Show. All right, let's get into Friday feedback for the week. You can always email info@davidpakman.com if you have anything you'd like to say. We will look at Discord comments, YouTube replies, Reddit posts, and so much more. Let's start today with a message from Facebook where Cultalators says cultist doesn't question their cult leader. Yes, Pakman, by definition, you're a cult. You divert from facts. You gaslight people. Pakman never explain when it's against his belief. Pakman is cult, period. You know, I know that this doesn't deserve a serious response because it's so unhinged, but one of the things that distinguishes this show from the cultish nonsense we see in MAGA is that I tell you, I am not the ultimate source of truth. I tell you, fact check me. And sometimes the fact checking finds that I got something wrong. And when I do, I make every effort to correct it right away. Cults claim that the leader is the ultimate source of truth. Trump claims to be the ultimate source of truth. I don't do that. And in fact, I would tell you, there is no one person, show, media outlet, or anything that is the ultimate source of truth. I'm trying to get as close to the truth as I can every day. You help to keep me accountable among other processes we have. And that is very much not like a cult. But when Trump tells you I alone can solve it, I'm more knowledgeable than the scientists and the pilots and the engineers and the doctors and the epidemiologists. And that's starting to sound a little bit like a cult. Big Chungus asked, does hiring an African like Elon Musk count as a DEI hire? You know, I know it's a joke. I know it's a tongue-in-cheek thing. But what's really interesting about the Trump cabinet in general is that there is a sort of affirmative action there. Pete Hegseth is not qualified to be Secretary of Defense, but he was given the job, despite being unqualified, for reasons that have nothing to do with merit. He was on Fox News and said nice things about Donald Trump. It's the epitome of using characteristics other than merit, skill, and knowledge for hiring, which they claim to be against. But when it's Pete Hegseth, I guess it's okay. When it's Tulsi Gabbard, I guess it's okay. That's where we are right now. Far Abbreviations asks, what did David replace his Tesla with? Sir, with tears in my eyes. I haven't been listening as much recently, but would like to know what you replaced his Tesla with. Many thanks, Mr. Sir. Well, that is absolutely correct. I am completely out of the Tesla world. I'm done. I was an investor in Tesla starting in 2015. I had two different Tesla vehicles, the Model 3 followed by the Model Y. I didn't like the build quality. I became increasingly uncomfortable driving a car associated with Elon Musk. Now, some people go, oh, well, you know, what about Volkswagen? Who knows if some of their... The point is, Tesla as a brand is Elon Musk. And I just didn't want it anymore. And quite frankly, now with all of the other options, there's really no need. Whereas at one point, if you wanted a electric vehicle with a reasonable range, you had no choice but Tesla. Now you have many options. And I have dipped into Rivian, where I have not found concerning aspects to the CEO's beliefs or whatever. And so far, the car is fantastic. I have to say, I like it much better than I liked any of my Teslas. A Space Penguin asks, David, do you check this subreddit? Because it has become overrun with trolls and bad faith actors, and it probably isn't good for your show either. Like, there's hardly any intelligent discussion happening here. The sheer ignorance about how government even works is stunning. The subreddit is practically dead about what is happening right now, and when news is posted, it's just mostly stupid comments and rage bait trolls. Yeah, I checked the subreddit. There's a mix of stuff on there. Any subreddit, when it grows to a certain size, is going to have a mix of different sorts of content. We source some of it for this segment. We are following it. We have moderators. I think the subreddit is basically fine. Srikai asked, where is David? The show is unwatchable without David. Not because the other commentators are bad. I'm just too used to David's voice that I can't listen to the show without it. Well, I was on vacation and I'm now back. And I know that every time I take a vacation, it's very triggering to some. It's very angering to others who say, how dare you take a vacation? How dare you? Well, The vacations will continue until the morale improves. No, but I'm back now. And I'm so sorry that the show was unwatchable when I was gone. One more message here from Cultilators, who says Elon Musk is the smartest person there is. He is almost the most generous and giving person. He is very nice, very fair. I wish the left-wing media, especially small-timers like the David Pakman show, can stop talking about him, but they can't because Republicans are living rent-free inside liberals' head. This is another sad day for liberals because Republicans are winning for America. This is a great day for Republicans because our economy is on its way to victory. Cope-harder liberals. You know, there's this thing that happens whenever someone is doing stuff and therefore in the news, we talk about them. And then we are told, oh, you're obsessed with that person. We never talked about Elon Musk until he became relevant to the global and national political sphere. Trump put him inside the Oval Office, so we're talking about it. And now he's living rent-free in our heads. Sometimes it's called following those who are having an influence. That's what we're doing. Jotham Hasty asks on the subreddit, is David an incrementalist on all political issues? David has said many times he believes in incrementalist approaches to policy changes. I'm curious if he favors that approach for every single issue, or if he has ever stated an accelerationist approach would work better for certain things. Normally, I would agree with him, but I'm worried incrementalism wouldn't be capable of salvaging whatever is left after this administration. I don't want to be doom and gloom, but the approach could be much more difficult depending on how broken the system in place is. So listen, I am not an accelerationist in any area. However, there are many areas in which I would accept incremental improvements, but would also accept bigger improvements. I'll give you an example. The tax code. The tax code is nuts. Would I accept incremental improvements if they are proposed? Of course. Every year that the tax code can be slightly better, as defined by my priorities and values, I would accept it. But if someone came and said, here's a broader reorg of the tax code, I would also go for that. I don't call that accelerationism. Here's the key distinction. Incrementalism as opposed to accelerationism means we are better off improving a system than allowing it to be completely destroyed with the idea of rebuilding it from the ground up, because often the rebuild is worse. People we don't want in power are the ones who do the rebuild, okay? So accelerationism, not good when it's about destroying a system to then rebuild it. When it comes to just improving stuff without allowing it to be destroyed, I'm all for bigger improvements rather than smaller ones when we can make them. Sometimes we can only get small improvements. And in those cases, I say, I will take the small improvements. Hopefully that's clear. James Brown's hair says this is Cenk's moment of truth. Cenk said the right would abandon Trump when it comes to war. Trump is now on record as saying he will send troops to Gaza to clean it up. If this happens and virtually no one on the right protests, do you think Cenk will admit he was wrong? Great question. I hope he will. I told Cenk Uygur from the Young Turks, I believe that you were being naive when you say, oh, here's what MAGA now wants. Here's what MAGA is now willing to do. I don't think they're willing to do any of it. We are now seeing Trump already go backwards on a lot of the things that he said he would do, and run counter to what people like Cenk were saying. I hope Cenk acknowledges, you know what, guys, I was wrong. If he wants to do it on this show, it's absolutely a conversation I welcome. Will it happen? I don't know. I hope Cenk is honest enough to acknowledge it. We've got a fantastic bonus show for you today. We also are down to just 4.5 weeks until my forthcoming book, The Echo Machine, goes live. Help us get the best possible shot at landing on New York Times bestseller list. I don't know if we will be able to do it. I hope we will. It would be a big win for independent media. Pre-order the book at davidpakman.com/book. If you want a signed copy, there is one place to get them, and it is from Brookline Booksmith. Go to davidpakman.com/booksmith. All copies ordered there will be signed. We will see you on the bonus show, and I will see you on Monday. Thanks a lot for watching today's show. I just want to take a second to tell you about today's sponsors. Introducing the award-winning Pod 4 Ultra from 8 Sleep, a high-tech mattress cover you can easily add to your existing mattress. The pod changes the temperature of your mattress. You can set it anywhere from 55 to 110 degrees, letting you and your partner set different temperatures on each side. I keep mine at 60 so that I don't get hot. It can also adjust the position of your mattress to reduce snoring, and you get 30 days to try and decide if you love it. Go to 8sleep.com/Pakman and use the code Pakman to get $350 off your Pod 4 Ultra. The link is in the description. One of our sponsors is Lucy. Lucy's tobacco-free nicotine has helped many people. Their new product, Lucy Breakers, are tobacco-free nicotine pouches with a capsule that can be broken to release flavor. It is such a better option than smoke or vapor. Lucy also has regular nicotine pouches and nicotine gum. Try a tobacco-free nicotine alternative delivered to your door. Join the countless people that Lucy has helped. Go to lucy.co and use the code Pakman for 20% off your first order. The link is in the description. Only for adults of legal age. Every order is age verified. The product contains nicotine. Nicotine is an addictive chemical.